Hey everybody, welcome to All There Is. I'm your host, Kelly Bargabas. Thanks for tuning in today. In this podcast, we are committed to sharing the human experience in order to connect, to shift paradigms, to make our world a little bit smaller. And one of the ways that we do that is by hearing from real people, real stories with real lives, so that we can experience what they're doing. There's no celebrities here, just real people with real stories and real lives. And today, I'm really honored and proud to have a guest with me. His name is Mark Haywood. Him and his wife, Christin, founded an organization called Marvelous Ways International. And in a nutshell, there's really a lot to it, but to really simplify it, they go where kids are in danger and try to stop it. They are coming up with real-world solutions to disrupt and change generations to come by providing hope. It's a really powerful organization. It's a really powerful mission that they have, and I hope you enjoy this conversation. I hope you learned something from it. So thanks for your time. Let's take a listen. Hey, everybody. Today I have with me Mark Haywood, who is the founder of an organization called Marvelous Ways International. Full disclosure, Mark and I have known each other for probably, I don't know, I was thinking about it last night. Our parents have been friends for probably 40 plus years.
Yeah, I think that's
So
about right.
I think Mark might have been about 5 when I met him, and I might have been about, I don't know, 15. Am I 10 years older than you or more maybe?
Or maybe less. I'm not sure.
But anyway, we've known each other for a long time. He knows where I come from. I know where he comes from. So we are old friends. But Mark, why don't you start by telling everybody who you are and who Marvelous Ways is, more importantly?
Yeah, those are loaded questions. The second one's much easier. As Kelly said, I lead this organization, Marvelous Ways. For quite a few years, I've done international community development, and I've been fortunate enough to do projects in East Africa. Actually, Kelly kind of got me into that many years ago with a microfinance program. Done projects in India and Haiti and Honduras, Costa Rica, various disaster relief, mostly faith-based previous to Marvelous Ways, though Marvelous Ways has really been non-religious organization. But essentially what we do and what I do is I focus on the plight of children and young people in developing nations. So it is the passion of myself and my wife and our friends to lift the lives of kids who come from very dangerous, impoverished communities in developing nations around the world.
That's a big statement. That's a big mission, right? The plight of kids in dangerous communities. So you go where kids are in danger.
That's right. People don't realize that a large, there's some estimates between 17 and 23% of the world's young people are displaced or in some form of displacement right now. You don't realize that there's vast numbers of population on the earth that lives in physical instability, social instability, and physical danger. And young people actually grow up in these environments. And that's the kind of our target that we hope and try and work really hard to reach.
And by reaching this population that is displaced and in danger, what do you hope to do, or what is your goal to try to help them?
There's multiple goals. Mostly, we'd really like to help them break the cycles of poverty. I know that's kind of a big term. What I really mean by that is I mean for them and their generations to come to develop a society in places where they, as you like to say, is they can call home, that is safe, that is a place where they can pursue their dreams and their interests and their ambitions, where they can develop their full potential and be who they really have the opportunity or want to be. And so that's really the end. We don't believe that young people need to go somewhere else all of the time to have a thriving life. Our hope is that they are the catalyst for changing society in the places, the villages, the cities, the nations that they live. So that is one of the large goals that we have as well, is we see reaching young people as the fastest and most efficient way to change society for the better.
And for the long term.
for the
like you
long
said,
term.
actually break the cycle. And you touched on something where you said you don't believe that the children or the kids that you're aiming to reach need to be rescued out of where they are. You're trying to allow them to create a space and to create home right where they're at, right? Where they're from, where they're born, where their family is, right? Where their roots are.
It was interesting, two of our projects right now, our projects as Marvelous Ways are in Central America. And everybody who travels there for the first time is marvels at how beautiful the landscape is and how rich the natural resources are of the nations. These are beautiful, natural, amazing wonders. And the idea that young people and families and communities can't thrive in these rich environments. I say rich because they're rich in natural resources and beautiful is kind of staggering. So we don't think that the answer is, ships and planes to the US or to Europe. We think the answer is thriving, safe, prosperous societies in these communities and around these communities. Now, there are places where sometimes leaving makes the most sense, right? So in East Africa, there are huge refugee camps where young people are actually born into refugee camps and live there. Now, in that case, that shouldn't be the forever home, right? We don't want to build a city out of a refugee camp. We want them to either return to their place of ancestry or to a place where, again, they can call home and build in a thriving society, sometimes a very diverse society.
And I know that one of the things that's different about Marvelous Ways is that you are trying to not just put a Band-Aid on what's wrong, not just trying to meet the immediate needs like so many great organizations do, right? They provide water, they provide food, they provide medical care. You're really going after the root causes of some of these issues, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I'm a student of history in my undergrad. I studied history and I've seen since really from the US perspective, we have a long history about it, but in terms of dollars and cents, from the 70s, the US has invested huge dollars in anti-poverty measures around the world. And many, many Western nations have done the same, wealthier, developed nations. And unfortunately, today, the world is not less impoverished. The world is not more peaceful. It is not more stable. It's not safer. Despite our huge efforts of time, of resources, of really big-hearted people, the differences that we'd hope to make we're actually seeing trends to the opposite. And so
Why
that
do
was
you
one
think
of the
that
things.
is?
Well, I think that it's an unbalanced approach. So as you said, most organizations and even, government or para-government organizations like the UN or UNICEF, they really focus on access issues, which you had just listed, access to clean water and medicine and education and all of those things. The challenge is that those are necessary. Let's not sugarcoat that. To a community that doesn't have good wells, they need water, right? Clean. That's a hierarchy of need for a society. It needs to begin there. But if left there, it actually doesn't produce long-term change, not the way that we would hope or expect. We have lots of evidence of this. Money alone actually doesn't create a thriving society. I mean, we live in the US, which is probably the wealthiest, not probably, it is the wealthiest nation in the history of humanity, right? And we have the greatest reach of education and hospitals, schools, resources, clean water, all those things that humanity has probably ever known. And how many would say that we have huge social issues in our nation, huge inequities, huge challenges. So money alone doesn't solve this problem, right? There are things that are intrinsic within society. I say intrinsic, or they're not felt or touched, that are every bit as critical to the health of a person, a family, a village, a city, a nation. And that's where these organizations have not approached those. It's been such an unbalanced approach, and in part because it's hard to measure, it's hard to take pictures of, it's difficult to raise funds for. We're talking about, cultural values and I think you're leading towards kind of one of the things that we specialize in, which is hope, right?
Yep.
And there is far too few of us who deal in those those matters.
My next question was going to be, okay, well, if you're not providing money and water and food, what is it that Marvelous Ways is providing that's different? What is that missing piece or pieces to real cultural change and breaking cycles and generational curses?
So we're not opposed to providing some of those things, but not as an end, only as a means, because we do understand that there is a hierarchy of needs, right? It's hard to reach somebody whose belly is empty,
Mm-hmm.
right? So sometimes you do have to provide meals, in which we're not opposed to. But your question was about what it is that we focus on if it's not those things. So in young people don't often make good choices, right? We always think about
Mm-hmm.
ourselves. That's like calling the sky blue. It's a very obvious statement. Even young people under good circumstances often don't make good choices. I can
Mm-hmm.
think of my own youth.
Yep.
Um, but part of making good choices is understanding your options, that you have options for good choices and bad choices. Also, the ability to recognize both opportunity and recognize risk. Recognizing opportunity or pursuing a goal is developed in a young person with several building blocks. But one of those building blocks is really the baseline belief that there is opportunity for something to be better, to have better, to achieve better, for something in my life to be better. A lot of that is just part of the human condition. Part of our survival mechanism is that we have to focus on something that gives us hope, to think that our current suffering won't last forever.
Mm.
Right? What happens with young people who grow up in dangerous situations is they don't develop this thought process of the future very often. They're only stuck in the day, maybe the next day. So they're thinking about, what am I going to eat today? How am I going to find something to feed myself and maybe my little brother? What route am I going to get home to without getting robbed or hurt or injured or risk? How can I get home quick enough before the sun goes down so I can make it home safely? Will my mom or her boyfriend or my grandfather be sober when they get home? Lots of these type of questions. So young people who grow up under constant threat or insecurity, or there be food insecurity or violence, or all they think about day after day, month after month, is just surviving, just the next day. And they develop these thought patterns. And so they never develop the ability to think about a future possibility, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if I study a little bit longer, if I stay awake a little bit, maybe if I join this club, or if I develop this skill, then there might be a hope for my future. But very often these young people, they live in many ways instinctually to survive.
Mm-hmm.
And breaking that thought process and developing the skills for young people to be able to recognize opportunity and risk, as well as make a plan and think about themselves in a future context, is a huge vision and task and work of Marvelous Ways. We have seen it many times that young people can grow out of the most difficult, hard, dangerous communities and thrive and succeed. How and why, what makes those kids so special? And very often they have a picture in their mind about where they want to go, or what they want to do, or what they want to achieve. And that becomes the focal point, and it allows them to kind of endure the hardship and set small goals, and to develop themselves, even some personal disciplines in a strange way, and they achieve, and eventually they change the reality of themselves and their families. Now, this is the vast minority of kids, but it tells us that it's possible, and that's what our programs work to make that to be the majority of the kids.
And you just described, I mean, when you were describing that, you described vision, right? I mean, that's really what vision is being able to imagine a different future and then setting those goals to work towards it, right?
Yeah, and a bag of groceries and a backpack given out at outreach, which I've done many, many times, does not produce that in anyone.
Yeah, right. It doesn't
Right?
produce vision. It doesn't produce hope. So talk to me about right now, I think your projects are focused in Costa Rica and Honduras. How did you land there? Why?
Uh,
Why Costa Rica? Why Honduras?
so one of our board members is a Costa Rican national and very involved in the government and intellectual community. He's a professor, and so there's some connections in Costa Rica that he had shared with us. And in research, we'd found that Costa Rica had a quickly growing narco economy that was sucking in young people at huge numbers, at disproportionate numbers. And we realized that Costa Rica would be a good place there's a huge educated population there, and some good resources and partners where we could set up places to test methods that could then be replicated all over Latin America. Costa Rica also is a place where a lot of refugees go. So nearly 20% of Costa Rica are Nicaraguan refugees. But they have refugees from Venezuela and many other nations from Latin America. They're kind of open to that as well. So it's a place it's diverse in lots of ways, and it's a place for us to really test and work on methods and programming to reach young people. So that's kind of where we began, and we found some really great partners there. Honduras, I have a history with. I've been traveling there for, I think, around 13 years off and on with a church group, and we'd made some really great relationships there, including probably one of the largest evangelical churches in I think it is in Honduras, and a large evangelical network across the nation. And why that matters is because in many parts of Central America, I think virtually all parts of Central America, governments are not trusted. They're regimes that kind of come and go. And so the stabilizing force and trusted force within society is often in the faith communities. Even if people are not adherents themselves, they still have a respect for, various churches, whether it be the Catholic Church or evangelical churches. Costa Rica, there's actually a vibrant Jewish community, synagogues. So these are places that the communities trust, and they're communities that you can develop relationship with. And so in Honduras, that's our partnership came there, and that gives us access virtually to every or any village or city nationwide in Honduras. So that was just a really excellent partnership for us. The other reason for Honduras, and I'll just be very personal, is I've seen many starving children there. Personally witnessed on many occasions children who are so malnourished that they're normally they're dark-haired people, very indigenous roots, turns blonde, and they get blotches on their skin because basically their body stops making pigment because they just are so malnourished. Children who are half the size that they should be and emaciated. And I say this from a very just kind of human standpoint. That's something you can't unsee. It's something that I could never reconcile in many ways. I knew I had to do something about that, that it's just not right that people grow up that way. And so that's one of those things that have kind of led us and kind of radicalized my wife and myself to that end. At one point, we thought we may even want to move to Honduras to be part of that solution, but we find our ability to affect change is actually better here and in a wider stretch. We also recognize that problem is in Nicaragua, it's in El Salvador, it's in Guatemala, as well as in the East.
Yeah, despite all the billions of dollars over the last 40 years, right, that have been, like you said at the beginning of this call, funneled into poverty relief, and yet we still have emaciated and starving children. And I wasn't going to go here yet, but I think this is a good segue. One of the things that I hear from people, and I know you do too, and so I want to touch on it to the people who are listening to this episode, is why should we care about kids outside of our own communities? We have kids starving here in America, and I'm just playing devil's advocate here. I don't subscribe to any of these beliefs, but we have children in danger here. We have people in our own communities who experience food instability. Can you talk about that for a minute and why we need to care about kids around the world?
Yeah, I get this comments of that kind almost every week. So very often they come from different places, and it come from different angles. The short answer is, and I'm not sure there is a short answer, but the short answer is that the children in Africa or Asia and Central or South America are just as deserving as your children and my children. Being born in the US, I loved it in another episode. You called it the ultimate privilege. But sometimes we think it's a birthright, and if we're not careful, we'll start to let that think that it's a superior birthright, that somehow our kids are more entitled to being safe from not being sexually assaulted or deprived of nutrition or allowed to go to school, that's just acceptable in other places, and it's not. So that's kind of my short answer. I try to turn it back around to the person who's asking the question. The person who asked that question, my question to them is, do you think that I am disloyal to my community and to the people of my city or my nation because I'm helping children in another nation? And if I am, why would you think that I'm disloyal? We all have biases, whether we recognize them or not. Every human has human natural biases. And very often we have to confront them. And so to those listening, if you have that sentiment that well, you should be helping kids in your community that look like you before you help somebody outside of your community, I would ask you, is that coming from a place of bias that is a good and healthy bias, or is that coming from a place of bias that you think that your people or your nation is more deserving?
That's good.
Yeah.
It screams too of just a scarcity mindset. Like if we help people outside of our own communities, we won't have enough for our own kids. Like there's only so much hope and vision to go around.
That's exactly right.
And we need to hoard it all here. And I was
Yes.
thinking about this too this morning. We get so hung up on borders and countries and governments, right? Which are temporary and
Yeah.
change often, right? And they're really imaginary lines. They exist to control us, but that shouldn't stop us from being connected.
Yeah, Kelly, I know you're very involved in the lives of your nieces and nephews. Fundamentally, the hopes and aspirations and the love that you have for your nieces and nephews is the exact same as aunts and uncles and parents and grandparents in every part of the world.
Right.
There are minority cases that we read about, some, abusive parents and things like that, right? But the vast majority of people really desire a future and a hope and a health and a safety for their children. And that is a rightful desire. We're not that different. We think about things, oh, we're this special people, right? We're not that special. I mean, there's some special things about our history and our people and our government, and we can be proud of that, I suppose. But loving our children is not special.
I know the top issues that you're working on right now, and I know this could change depending on where you're at. Immigration, teen parenthood, or pregnancy, keeping
Yeah.
kids out of the narco trade, right? Those are your three major focuses.
People ask me about immigration all the time, but they ask about it. And I actually wrote an article not too long ago. It's on christianheadlines.com about immigration and looking for new approaches to it. And people ask about it in terms of from the perspective of the US, of people wanting to come into our country. And we're working on the immigration problem, not because we're opposed to more people wanting to come to the US. Why wouldn't anybody want to come to the US in so many ways? I get that. Really, we're working on it in the same light that we're working on youth pregnancy or teen pregnancy, as well as young people going into the narco economy, because it is destructive to the communities and societies. So young people in Central and South America who are looking to immigrate to the US take a huge risk and very often abandon their education and their future. Many of them die on the journey. We don't even know the real numbers just because there's nobody to count that very well. So much of human trafficking begins in that journey from Central and South America up to the US. It is the top place where human trafficking really kind of begins. For so many of these young people, it is extraordinarily dangerous and damaging to their lives. Also, the ones who make it very often have had to borrow money from loan sharks in gangs in various places to come to the States and then work in kind of under the table jobs and send money back because somebody in their family is essentially back and they're the ransom or the collateral to pay back the loan to get to the US, or maybe they borrowed it from a family member and the goal is that they now have to get enough money to hire a coyote, a smuggler, to get other family members across. It's a huge detriment to these families in these communities. Also, immigration is a zero-sum game. So all the benefit of that is on the nation where the people arrive. So our consumer prices are driven down, our labor prices are driven down. We're able to pay less because there are immigrants in our kitchens and building our houses. And in my neighborhood, they're changing roofs out, so on and so forth. What is happening to the nations that they're coming from is there's this huge brain drain and talent drain. Imagine the 20-somethings of the United States just disappearing overnight, right? From 17 to 33, you have a very small population, and the population you have is largely uneducated. How do you operate business, government, civil society without that population? And that's what's happening in some of these nations. There's this huge drain of youth and talent, and it's detrimental to their long-term viability.
That was a really good explanation. Now, one of the things that drew me to Marvelous Ways is that your goal is to build solutions that work, to come up with some strategies that will actually solve the root causes and change generations, but then to also be able to model that and scale that and spread it to other communities. Right? I don't know if I explained that how you would explain it. So talk about that.
No, you're exactly right. So, immigration is not a new, immigration is not a new challenge, right? It's kind of an old challenge. So we look at kind of old challenges and find new solutions. So we utilize technology. We're developing a predictive model right now to be able to go into high schools in Central America, give a small predictive model, small survey to young people, and then have a list of the young people who are the most likely to drop out of school, the most likely to immigrate, and then institute programs to help root those young people in their schools, in their community, and in their future, so that they don't make that dangerous choice. And that's just in Honduras and one of the projects that we're working on. But as you said, the goal is really to kind of crack the code in some of these really challenging problems, and then freely give them or share them with other organizations, government organizations, faith-based organizations, across lots of platforms, who can replicate, duplicate, and innovate on top of what we do, and even make it better to solve these challenges. A great example is that we now have a system that we've developed in Costa Rica over 3 years, where we can set up an after-school program within just about any community in Costa Rica. Given the right funds, we can prevent young people from going into the narco economy. So we have a proven method. So now the work is documenting it, is creating the books and the manuals and the team to be able to share that method with any other organization in kind of the northern triangle of Central America who wants to replicate it. Let's cut off the supply chain of 13-year-olds to the narco economy. That's the goal. It's a huge goal, but that's what we're working on.
Wow. Cut off the supply chain. That's a statement right there. Like who can't get on board with that, right?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, we really are looking for new friends and new partners, and financially, intellectually, in all regards to think about it. Our biggest obstacle in that, I think, is one you talked about. Why to care about young people in other nations, overcoming that obstacle. And I think we discussed that already. But the other one is to help people believe that it's possible.
Right.
It shouldn't just be a given that young people will be starving in developing nations and we should just be okay with that reality, or that young people don't have access to graduate from school, that they have to deal with the gangs and forced prostitution and human trafficking. And that's just the way it is in this country, right? We don't have to accept that. There's solutions, and hopefully we're part of that work to find those solutions.
Right. And that's a good segue. I was going to ask you, what is the biggest challenge to running an organization like Marvelous Ways and getting this work done?
Very honestly, it's funding. It's financial. That's our biggest challenge, in part because a lot of our work is research and development. So when you're doing research and developing and you're developing solutions, by definition, you're working on things very often that are unproven, and you're working to innovate and to prove them. When people are investing their charitable dollars to an organization, it's really easy to go, okay, I'm gonna give dollars to this organization that gives away this many bags of groceries. But we're asking people to donate, and organizations and corporate partners to give, and to the belief and the work that we're doing. And it's not without evidence. I mean, we're not saying blindly give. We're saying that we're working on things very tangible. We have real data, real numbers, real expectations, the real deliverables. But it's different than charities that you're used to, and that you're used to thinking about, that are dealing with access issues as opposed to complex social issues.
And in the world of charitable giving and trying to raise money, I don't know if people who've never been in that position really understand how hard it is also to ask for money, to say, hey, I'm doing this. Will you give me some of your money to help me do it? It's a hard thing to do.
I underestimated how hard it is.
Yeah. It's a challenging thing.
Yeah, and the vast majority of people who earn enough to be able to share work very, very hard for their money. I mean, there's a sort of myth that wealthy people are hanging around the golf club all the time, and quite opposite. They're working huge hours, and they're working very hard, and they're working to be very smart, and companies as well. So yes, coming to them and asking and saying, hey, we have a solution, and we're developing a solution. We're working really hard on this model. This is our time frame, right? This is going to take us a couple of years to one, work all out, and then help to bring to scale. The good news is that two of our projects we're already working on the scaling function of it. Like, okay, now it's just about funding to scale these to many other cities and communities. The one in Costa Rica, the solution that we're working on in public schools in Honduras, we're a year and a half into the development phase. We have a whole nother year of proof of concept, and we're going to scale a little bit in this next year. But the following year, it will be ready to go to every city in Honduras, right? We could reach 250,000 young people, vulnerable young people, given the right resources. So asking people to sort of delayed gratification of what their investment is going to mean, like, hey, in 2025 it's going to be incredible, right? Has been a challenge for me and our team, but hopefully we're learning, and we're getting better at it.
And you really have to be in it for the long game too, right? Like when you were talking 250,000 kids, it's a huge, huge number. What a great success. Still a drop in the bucket to that 23% of the world's population that's living in danger. But what I was thinking of is those 250,000 kids who are going to grow up, live a different life, and just the ripple effect of now those 250,000 kids. And I'm sure the number won't stop there, but what that's going to mean to generations to come. If you can change the lives of 250,000 kids, I think, how many families is that? But you kind of have to break out of your immediacy mindset. You talked a little bit about that with kids who are in survival mode. I think as consumers, as American consumers, we're very much about the instant gratification, right? Like we want, our gratification now. If we spend money, we want to know what we're going to get. We want that now. And so we have to kind of challenge ourselves to think about the long term and what it takes to really change the world.
Yeah, that's in so many ways, that's a Western mindset. In the Eastern societies and cultures, people think generationally very often. The work of breaking poverty cycles in young people and in families is not instant. There is no microwave solution. It is a consistency of successful methodology that's again and again and again. We have this program. We have coaches and mentors, and we train them for almost a week before we give them a group of 8 to 10 young people, and we tell them, if you forget all the methodology and the psychology and some of the techniques that we're teaching you, remember this: show up, be consistent. Like, There's nothing in their lives that is consistent other than the lack. Show up continually to be consistent. And it's that consistency over time that produces the results that you want. And so, yes, 250,000 is a huge number to me, but it is a drop in the bucket when we talk about it. The other sort of ripple effect is what we talked about earlier, which is publish the model, share the model. Once the model is proven and effective, then people need to adapt it to whatever social context they are and whatever nation they are, and replicate it. Humans, we're just similar in so many ways. We just have very human needs and human instincts. And so these solutions can be adapted and innovative and grown. And it's entirely possible to break these cycles and to have really vibrant societies. History tells us that. I mean, and it goes in the inverse, right? So we've seen places like, let me give you an example, Argentina. Argentina in the 80s was the third largest economy in our hemisphere. So it was this vibrant economy, center of arts and culture. It's this huge, amazing nation that wasn't that far from the US in most measurables. They then get government instability, economic instability, eventually economic meltdown, so many societal collapses. And today they are scratching and clawing. Many parts of society have fallen into now generational, third generation of poverty. We're talking about the early 80s to today. The same is possible in the inverse. Costa Rica often measures itself against Israel because they became nations at the same time. Within the same year, the two countries became nations. And so they compare each other. They're roughly around the same population, though I think Israel has grown a little bit more population-wise. But their economic output, the development of universities, hospitals, churches, societies, synagogues, all of those things. And so they parallel with each other, and they're looking at each other, they're benchmarking, and they recognize that at a community level is the beginning of growth for their society. And so it's entirely possible to have significant development socially, economically, and benefiting all of society. It's just a work that begins in places that we don't expect very often.
And we could see it, thinking about that the inverse can happen. We can see it in our lifetime. So even though it's long term, it's not immediate results. We got 30 years, I think, left. So, we could see this change in our lifetime.
We've seen it from our grandparents, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yours and my grandparents and parents. My father worked in a factory, and thank God for that opportunity. Your dad in the quarry, right?
Yeah.
Worked in a quarry and sent his kids to university, and now you're a C-suite executive, right?
Yeah.
And your nieces and nephews are going to excellent schools and thriving.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's entirely possible. It's possible in places. It's not just possible in the U.S. It's possible in other places as well.
It's because of people like you and Kristen who have devoted your lives to saying, "Hey, it doesn't have to be this way. We can change this. We can make a difference. We can disrupt these patterns." As we wrap up our discussion, what do you want to leave our listeners with? If you could tell them one thing that you want them to remember from this episode, the people who are listening to this podcast episode, what is the one thing that you want them to walk away and know about the work of Marvelous Ways and how they can be a part of it?
The thing that I want, I think, are your listeners, and I appreciate them so much. I'm counted among them. I listen to most episodes. I really appreciate this podcast. So it's a great honor to be on it. To really take away is that we have to give hope. And you use this expression, and I really appreciate it. Hope is an ingredient that is critical. You cannot build a young person, a family, a society, a community void of real hope and real opportunity. And when people can't see hope, they make really bad decisions and really dangerous decisions that affect all of us. To think that they don't affect you or me because they're happening in another nation it's foolish at best, quite honestly. There's always a ripple effect. But giving hope what that can do and what that can do in a young person in a community is significant, and it is a long-term viable solution to some of the really huge challenges in our society, including suicide, right, which we didn't even talk about, is a desperate lack of hope. So invest in organizations like Marvelous Ways or other organizations and people who are working to that end. I volunteered when I was in Syracuse with the Boys and Girls Club on their board. I'm a board member of In My Father's Kitchen, other organizations that I've worked with in Central America. And I'm really promoting this concept of don't just give away access issues of food and groceries and backpacks and clothes and warm clothes and blankets and clean water and all the things. Give hope, inspire it consistently again and again, and watch and see how communities and individuals will solve their own problems because then they have the hope to do it. So that is, I know that's a lot of words, but that's the truth. Give hope.
No, I love that. I love it. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming today and talking about what you're doing, what Marvelous Ways is doing. I know that people can check out your website. It's marvelouswaysint.org. So people go there. There's a give button right on the website where you can donate anything that you can to keep these projects moving, to spread them across the world, to really disrupt and go where kids are in danger. Stop the supply chain of feeding up our young people to people who mean them harm. I mean, that's really the bottom line. We want to give these kids a different future. So I know you got a golf tournament coming up in 2 weeks. If you're in the Syracuse area, people can still register and sign up for the golf tournament on the 28th.
They can
Okay.
up to, I think, about 3 days in advance. Bring your foursome, be part of a great event. To date, everything that we have done, which is pretty significant, I think, is all been private donations, private donors. The vast majority of our donors are not multimillionaires. They're people who have huge hearts, who care about young people in dangerous communities around the world. And sometimes, very often, they'll give $30 a month or $40 a month, sometimes more. And that has funded this incredible work that is making a huge difference. And so we appreciate all those people. And if you want to be part of them, as Kelly said, check us out on our website, be part of our golf tournament, friend us, like us, and we really want to build relationships. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks everybody for tuning in today. Give hope. If you can give to Marvelous Ways and invest in hope, invest in the future of children, regardless of where they live, go to their website, marvelouswaysint.org. You can go to their social media page. I will tag them when I post this podcast episode. I'll put links out there. But go to their website, and if you can invest in hope, if you can give, please do. They're looking for people who are willing to go on this journey with them. They are looking for people who are interested in disrupting these things that are happening to children around the world. And so if you're one of those people and you have the ability to give, please do. If you don't right now, are not in a situation where you can give right now, I get it. I've been there. We've all been there. Most of us have been there at different times in our life, and that's okay. But if you could share this podcast episode, share their website, tell somebody about what they're doing, maybe tell somebody you know who can give, who's looking for an organization to give to, spread the news, spread the word. That is just as impactful for them to try to get some traction. There's so much content out there these days in social media, online, everywhere you go. There's lots of people doing lots of different things. So sometimes it can be a challenge just to be heard and to let people know and listen to what you're doing. So if you can give money, that's great. But if you can't, help spread the word. That would be awesome too. Thanks for listening today. I really appreciate your time. You can go to kellybargabas.com for past episodes. You can also find them on any platform that you listen to podcasts on. And until we meet again, take care.